A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu, and with me is Nishit Kumar, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India progressing rapidly and witnessing revolutions in fields of infrastructure, health and technology, says Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Addresses grand finale of Smart India Hackathon virtually. Indian government says country ready for launch of 5G services by October this year. India asks its nationals in Sri Lanka to exercise caution, tells them to examine currency convertibility and fuel situation. Taiwan proposes large rise in defense spending amid escalating tensions with China. Former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan gets protective bail till 1st of September in terrorism case. And in badminton, Indian shuttler H.S. Pranoy defeats compatriot Lakshya Sen to enter quarter-finals of World Championships in Tokyo. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that the country is progressing rapidly and is witnessing revolutions in fields of infrastructure, health and technology. Interacting with smart hackathon innovators through video conference on Thursday, Mr. Modi said the effective collaboration among students, government along with private organizations will fulfill the dream, that is, vision of New India. He said the future of India will be dependent on the innovations and work done by the youth. The Prime Minister of India urged the youth to look at innovations not just for India but for countries across the world. He stressed on the need to take affordable, sustainable and innovative solutions to the world. Mr. Modi said India can implement a 6G network connection by the end of this decade. The Indian Prime Minister expressed confidence that the aspirational society of India will act as a driving force for a new India. Communications Minister of India Ashwani Vaishnaw on Thursday said the country is now ready for launch of 5G services by October this year. Mr. Vaishnaw said this while releasing amendment in the Indian Telegraph Right of Way Rules 2016 to facilitate faster and easier deployment of telecom infrastructure for faster 5G rollout in India.
India today said it is following the developments in Sri Lanka. Replying to media queries on incidents jeopardizing the safety of Indians in Sri Lanka, spokesperson in External Affairs Ministry of India, Arindam Bagchi, said Indians are the largest tourists in the island nation and safety and well-being of Indian nationals are of prime importance. He advised Indian nationals to exercise care and caution while being in Sri Lanka. He said they should examine all relevant factors including currency, convertibility and fuel situation for any essential travel. On the abduction of Sikh woman in Pakistan, Mr. Bagchi said it is shocking to see this level of religious intolerance in Pakistan.
These instances reveal the atmosphere of insecurity faced by religious minorities in Pakistan. We strongly condemn the targeting of minorities there, including Hindus, Sikhs and Christians. The government of India has been raising such issues through diplomatic channels with the government of Pakistan, and we call upon Pakistan to end this discriminatory approach towards its minorities and discharge its responsibility in ensuring the safety, security and well-being of all its citizens.
On India-Japan 2+2 ministerial meeting, the spokesperson said that Japan has offered to host the next meeting. He said India-Japan 2+2 ministerial meeting is an opportunity to review security cooperation between the two nations. Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will hold bilateral talks with Tanzanian Minister of Defence and National Service Dr. Stergom Mena, Lawrence Tax in New Delhi tomorrow. During the bilateral talks, the ministers will review the defence cooperation between the two countries and explore new avenues including defence industry cooperation to further strengthen bilateral engagements. Dr. Tax will visit Hyderabad during her stay in India, where she will be interacting with the Indian defence industries.
External Affairs Minister of India Dr. S. Jaishankar co-chaired the 8th India-Brazil Joint Commission meeting with his Brazilian counterpart Carlos Franca in Brasilia on Wednesday. The comprehensive discussions covered trade and investments, petroleum, biofuels, health, pharma, traditional medicine, science and technology, space, defense and counter-terrorism among others. After the meeting, agreements were signed in the fields of broadcasting and taxation. Both ministers exchanged views on the BRICS, IBSA, UN, G20 and the Ukraine conflict. The third India-Mauritius Joint Committee meeting on small and medium enterprise cooperation was held in New Delhi on Thursday. The Indian side was led by Minister for Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Narayan Rane. In the meeting, both sides reviewed the present engagement between India and Mauritius in the field of MSMEs. They held discussion on potential areas of cooperation in various areas, including exchange of best practices and experiences in development of MSME sector and holding of physical and virtual exhibitions. During the Mauritius delegation's visit, 2 memoranda of understanding on cooperation have also been signed.
Indian Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra held a candid and useful exchange with Iranian journalists who are on a week-long familiarization visit to India beginning today. The External Affairs Ministry called it further deepening the broad-based India-Iran ties. Home Minister of India Amit Shah held a review meeting in New Delhi on Thursday on the security situation of Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Home Minister asked security forces to continue with the coordinated efforts through meticulous and well-planned counter-terrorism operations to wipe out terrorism. Mr. Shah reviewed the working of the security grid and on various actions being taken to reduce the incidence of terrorism. Over the last few years, the Indian Home Minister said it is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision to have a prosperous and peaceful Jammu and Kashmir.
The Indian Army on Thursday eliminated 3 terrorists and averted an infiltration bid along the line of control LOC in the Uri sector of the Indian Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. According to defense spokesperson, the security forces launched the operation on Wednesday based on specific inputs from army intelligence agencies. Multiple ambushes were laid to trap the infiltrators, and intensive electronic surveillance of the suspected area led to detection of the attempt on Thursday morning. This led to a heavy exchange of fire in which the terrorists were killed. India's first indigenously built aircraft carrier IAC Vikrant to be commissioned on 2nd of September. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi will be the chief guest at the commissioning of the indigenous aircraft carrier Vikrant in Kochi. Speaking to reporters in New Delhi, Navy Vice Admiral S.N. Ghormade said, "With this, India has joined the select club of nations including the US, UK, Russia, China and France to design and manufacture aircraft carriers above 40,000 tons. The entire cabling of INS Vikrant, around 2,500 kilometers in length, has been made in India, which is a big achievement. Warship-grade steel has also been made in India with the help of Indian Navy, Defence Research and Development Organisation and Steel Authority of India Limited." The Vice Admiral said it can be later exported to other countries.
Former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan was granted protective bail till the 1st of September in a terrorism case on Thursday. The cricketer turned politician had previously secured transit bail from the Islamabad High Court till the 25th of August. Anti-Terrorism Court ATC accepted Imran Khan's pre-arrest bail application against a bond of 1 lakh Pakistani rupees after it appeared before the court earlier in the day. Local media reports that the court issued notices to the police and the petitioner while protecting Khan from arrest.
India was among the 13 countries who voted in favor of a proposal seeking to allow Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to address the United Nations Security Council virtually. We have a report.
As the UNSC meeting began, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Vasily A. Nebenzia, requested a procedural vote concerning the Ukrainian president's participation in the meeting through video conference. Russia voted against, while China abstained from voting. The result of the voting was 13 in favor, 1 vote against, 1 abstention. Earlier on Wednesday, India announced that it is ready to dispatch its 12th consignment of humanitarian aid to Ukraine, consisting of 26 types of medicines on a special request from the Ukrainian side. This comes as the Ukrainian authorities requested assistance from the government of India to tackle the looming crisis in the country. Addressing a United Nations Security Council briefing, the country's permanent representative to the UN, Ruchira Kambodh, said that India's approach will be to promote dialogue and diplomacy with an aim to end the conflict to mitigate the economic challenges emerging from the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, seeking an early resolution. Abhineet Shukla for World News.
In today's Hotspot section, we have a discussion on outcomes of SCO Defence Ministers meeting in Tashkent. In conversation are security analyst, Commodore retired C. Uday Bhaskar and journalist Ajay Banerjee.
Commodore Bhaskar, the Defence Minister was very categorical about Ukraine and the Russia crisis. he made two important points on the subject of Russia and Ukraine, in which he first said that India has expressed concern with the situation of Ukraine, and second, he said Russia and Ukraine need to sit down and talk and resolve the crisis. How do you see these two lines in the speech of the Defense Minister at the SCO meeting yesterday?
Mr. Rajnath Singh's observations at the SCO meeting are indeed politically very significant, both in terms of the current global response to the war in Ukraine, which, as we are aware, has completed 6 months, and we have actually entered the 7th month of that war. So far, I think there has been a certain amount of internal review in India about this war and what kind of a response India should make in the public domain. And I would say that there was a certain amount of circumspection, and India did not join the US-led criticism against Moscow at that time. But concurrently, India was both reviewing and conveying its own concerns to Moscow bilaterally. And I think this articulation in a collective forum such as the SCO, which brings together Russia, China, India, along with the stans, as also Pakistan, is, to my mind, politically and diplomatically significant articulation by India. And in a way, if I may add, it also, I think, burnishes India's own credibility as a voice of a certain degree of restraint and reason at a time when there is a certain shortage of objective and calm reflection on these matters, because the whole Ukraine war has got polarized into a binary between Russia on one side and the US-led alliance on the other.
Commodore Bhaskar, you mentioned humanitarian crisis. The Defense Minister also mentioned at the SU meeting yesterday. He said, I quote, India is concerned about the humanitarian crisis. Sir, in and around Ukraine, could you please explain this to our listeners? What would in and around Ukraine mean?
I would say that this is, I think, a very subtle reference to the fact that what is happening in Ukraine, the war itself, is having a ripple effect in the extended region. Now, we are aware that immediately for those countries that are proximate to Ukraine, there is a major refugee issue of people who have fled Ukraine and are seeking safety. Many of the smaller countries are unable to cope, and there is a food and fuel crisis that is currently looming large. And not only in Europe, but outside of Europe, we can see that those countries that were dependent on timely food supplies, fertilizer supplies emanating from Ukraine are now having to deal with shortages. That in turn leads to a humanitarian crisis, which in a non-linear way is being felt in many of the vulnerable nations, the developing nations of the world, well outside of the European theatre. Now, I do not want to overinterpret what Mr. Rajnath Singh has said, but I think he was also alerting the SCO as a community to draw their attention to the fact that apart from Ukraine, there are other regions in our own Southern Asian context, which is the primary footprint of focus for the SCO.
We will move on to Afghanistan. The Defense Minister of India, Rajnath Singh, laid a lot of stress on the situation in Afghanistan. He voiced that India is full support to peaceful, secure and stable Afghanistan, and he also stressed that the respect of Afghanistan's sovereignty, independence and integrity, national unity and also non-interference in its internal affairs. He also called for a broad-based, inclusive political structure in that country. Commodore Bhaskar, what does this mean?
I would say that the Defense Minister, Mr. Rajnath Singh, has reiterated a consistent Indian position in relation to developments within Afghanistan. If you recall, even before the US withdrawal, which was August of last year, 2021, and when there was a certain flux in Afghanistan, India had upheld these normative principles about what would be the appropriate political template for Afghanistan to deal with its own internal challenges. But we are aware that due to a variety of reasons, India had a certain constraint in dealing with the post-US withdrawal Afghanistan when the Taliban seized power. And there's a sense of deja vu that India was dealing with a political situation not very different when the Taliban had seized power in Afghanistan in the pre-9/11 context. So I think there is what I would call as a reiteration about what are the elements that India would like to commit itself to or support, knowing fully well that the current political and security situation within Afghanistan and the nature of its own relationship with a country like Pakistan is not conducive to any kind of long-term stability. And this has been compounded by the policies being adopted by the Taliban over the last year. And this is most evident in relation to their gender approach, how they are dealing with the issue of girls and women, which is a replay of some extremely harsh provisions that have been brought into play. So I think as a country that has a stake in the well-being and stability both of the Afghan people and the socio-political environment in which they are currently located under Taliban rule, India is signaling what I would call as certain principles around which there could be a collective effort. But again, we know from the politics both within the SCO and the kind of individual priorities for different nation states, particularly the major players, in this case China, Russia, as two of the more credible members within the SCO given their own involvement and geography with the region. And Pakistan, which has long played a role, often negative, in relation to the affairs of Afghanistan. Unless there is consensus among them, it is unlikely that there would be any meaningful progress. And I think India's own message at the SCO is to understand the complexity and the different elements that are contributing to the problem, and that unless each of the stakeholders does its own internal review, there would not be any meaningful progress in trying to either stabilize or support Afghanistan at the present juncture.
The defense minister also spoke about not allowing Afghan territory to be used to intimidate or attack any country or providing safe haven to terrorists. Now, he has not named the country, but we all know that he is referring to Pakistan and its activities in Afghanistan. How important is this, that we are making a statement, yes, but Pakistan has been doing this in Afghanistan, using that territory to ferment problems all over the world. Mr. Rajnath Singh's statement and the context of today's geopolitical scenario, how do you see it?
This is one of the abiding challenges for the SCO as an organization. Ever since its inception of the SCO, which is also predated by the Shanghai Five, it's more than 20 years now since the SCO was formed. And one of the structural problems was that apart from what I would call as the old chestnuts, the familiar kind of bilateral problems, as for instance between India and Pakistan on one hand, China and India on the other in relation to the territorial dispute. And let us not forget that the SCO also has got 4 of the Central Asian states, the Stans, and they have their own bilaterals where there is a fair amount of dissonance and discord in relation to both what they perceive as support to terror groups, which have different political and religious drivers within the region. And what they feel is the support being provided to one group or the other by one of the major players. So there are many layers of the security challenge within and among the members of the SCO. And there are many bilaterals that are discarded. But what really I think brings the group together is a concern about the nature of terrorism. Each of these countries has experienced it differently. And let me also say as an analyst that each of these countries has also been culpable in different ways in either aggravating, stoking, or endorsing in a tacit way some of these activities. Some countries, of course, their track record is too stark to be ignored, as in the case of Pakistan, which has invested in terror in terms of state policy. But again, without rocking the boat, I think the SCO has allowed countries to share their own concerns at a fairly senior political level, which is what the Defense Ministers Forum does provide. So I think this is the challenge for the political leadership of the SCO member countries, that to what degree are they willing to make an effort to review existing policies where they are seen to be either deliberately or inadvertently stoking terror, and taking Afghanistan as the case study where the incubation of terror, particularly that with the Islamist orientation, is a reality, is something that would have to be addressed over the long term, because the manifestation can be very unpredictable, as we have seen, for instance, in the case of the so-called lone wolf attack on the well-known writer, Mr. Salman Rushdie. Now, that is the most recent example. We just have to reel back and recall what has been happening within Afghanistan over the last 3 to 4 months, where periodically different groups have claimed responsibility, whether affiliated to the Islamic State or otherwise, for attacks on sectarian targets, again within the larger framework of the Islamic faith. Now, these are very real challenges within the Central Asian region and the proximate Southern Asian region.
Very rightly, you have pointed out that terrorism is one of the things that the SCO has not addressed adequately. The Defense Minister yesterday, Rajnath Singh ji, spoke specifically about stopping all forms of cross-border terrorism. He also spoke about seeking a joint institutional capability with the SCO member states. Now, this is a dichotomy in itself because one of the member states is Pakistan, which actually thrives on exporting terrorism from its country. It's part of its state policy. How serious is the SCO in dealing with the subject?
Yeah, I think the SCO had taken a very careful decision when they admitted, if you remember, both India and Pakistan, knowing fully well that there is a history about Pakistan and its own support to terror-related activities that goes back to the Cold War. If you remember, it is the beginning of this whole investment by the Pakistani deep state in terror is almost coterminous with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 and the decade that followed. So I think when the SCO had prioritized counter-terrorism as one of its principal activities, and the need to create capacity, I think the macro political decision was that it would be more desirable to bring Pakistan into the tent. By itself, I think it's almost like stating the obvious when we are aware of the nature of the relationship between China and Pakistan, and given China's own locus in the SCO, I think this would have been a given. But my sense is that when you read the deliberations of the early years, Russia also was persuaded that bringing Pakistan into the SCO would perhaps be more desirable than keeping it out, and we do not always have access to the closed-door deliberations. But my sense is that the professionals would have conveyed to Pakistan all the evidence that they have about such state support to terrorism, and the fact that even if they are unable to prevail or prevent Pakistan from pursuing this path, I think the SCO enables the group to make Pakistan aware that its own activities are on the radar, and no amount of double speak would change the reality on the ground. And this becomes, again, the most complex structural issue to be dealt with. How do you deal with a state that is invested in terror, which I think is the subtext of what the SCO is all about.
Commodore Bhaskar, you have made very important points regarding terrorism and the role of SCO and how Pakistan was actually brought into SCO, seeing the geopolitical scenario. Mr. Rajnath Singh has spoken at the SCO Defense Ministers meeting yesterday in Uzbekistan about several topics, which includes the Russia-Ukraine war, and India has spoken about having a kind of talks between the two parties so that the crisis is resolved. India has also spoken eloquently about Afghanistan and the need to have a stable Afghanistan and non-interference into the affairs of Afghanistan. Commodore Bhaskar, thank you for speaking to us on the subject.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio, giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
The Taiwan government has proposed more than $19 billion in defense spending for next year. The overall proposed defense budget proposed by President Tsai Ing-wen's cabinet sets a 13.9% year-on-year increase to a record $19.41 billion. It includes funds for new fighter jets, weeks after China staged large-scale war games around the island. China carried out its largest ever military exercises around the Taiwan after a visit by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Over the past 75 years since independence, India's largest public service broadcaster, All India Radio, has been the proverbial storyteller for 1.3 billion citizens across the country. All India Radio is celebrating 75 years of freedom with a series Azad Bharat Ki Baat, Akashvani Ke Saath. It showcases the journey of India since independence in various walks of life through the storytelling of All India Radio.
Azad Bharat Ki Baat, Akashvani Ke Saath, reliving the journey of India since independence over the last 75 years with All India Radio. From 15th August, the series is being broadcast on All India Radio, 100.1 FM Gold Channel, primetime news bulletins, and across all its platforms. Tune in to stay updated with All India Radio.
In today's episode, we bring you the story of the Prime Ministers of India who served the nation from the 19th of March 1998 onwards.
In today's episode, we bring you the story of the Prime Ministers of India who served the nation from the 19th of March 1998 onwards. Atal Bihari Vajpayee became the Prime Minister on the 16th of May 1996 and held the post till the 1st of June 1996. He was again elected as the Prime Minister on the 19th of March 1998 and served till May 22nd, 2004.
मैं अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूं कि मैं विधि द्वारा स्थापित भारत के संविधान के प्रति सच्ची श्रद्धा और निष्ठा रखूंगा। मैं भारत की प्रभुता और अखंडता क्षुण्ण रखूंगा। मैं संघ के प्रधानमंत्री के रूप में अपने कर्तव्यों का श्रद्धा पूर्वक और शुद्ध अंतःकरण से निर्वहन करूंगा तथा मैं भय या पक्षपात, अनुराग या द्वेष के बिना सभी प्रकार के लोगों के प्रति संविधान और विधि के अनुसार न्याय करूंगा।
Dr. Manmohan Singh was elected as the Prime Minister on the 22nd of May 2004 and served till the 26th of May 2014 for 2 terms.
I, Manmohan Singh, do swear in the name of God and by God established that I will uphold the sovereignty and integrity of India. Indicate or be willing to any such all questions and charge of my duty as Prime Minister.
Narendra Modi, the first ever Prime Minister to be born after independence, took oath on the 26th of May 2014 and served till May 2019.
मैं नरेंद्र दामोदर दास मोदी ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूं कि मैं विधि द्वारा स्थापित भारत के संविधान के प्रति सच्ची श्रद्धा और निष्ठा रखूंगा।
Mr. Modi was sworn in again as the Prime Minister on the 30th of May 2019 and continues to serve till date.
मैं नरेंद्र दामोदर दास मोदी ईश्वर की शपथ लेता हूं कि मैं विधि द्वारा स्थापित भारत के संविधान के प्रति सच्ची श्रद्धा और निष्ठा रखूंगा। मैं भारत की प्रभुता और अखंडता अक्षुण्ण रखूंगा। मैं संघ के प्रधानमंत्री के रूप में अपने कर्तव्यों का श्रद्धापूर्वक और शुद्ध अंतःकरण से निर्वहन करूंगा।
And now we move on to a special segment, Potpourri. Dinosaurs are the most dangerous creatures to have ever roamed the planet. They have been a source of fascination for both the young and old for centuries. For a new kind of Jurassic experience for fans, a high-tech Jurassic World exhibition has been opened up at London in the United Kingdom. The exhibition is running at London's Excel Arena from Thursday through November. Indian shuttler H.S. Pranoy defeated compatriot and Commonwealth Games champion Lakshya Sen on Thursday to enter the men's single quarterfinals of World Championships in Tokyo. The two Indian men's double pair of Dhruv Kapila and M.R. Arjun and Satvik Sairaj Ranki Reddy and Chirag Shetty also moved into the quarterfinals. However, Olympic bronze medalist Saina Nehwal was knocked out of the World Championship. A quick look at the headlines once again. India progressing rapidly and witnessing revolutions in fields of infrastructure, health and technology, says Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Addresses grand finale of Smart India Hackathon virtually. Indian government says country ready for launch of 5G services by October this year. India asks its nationals in Sri Lanka to exercise caution, tells them to examine currency convertibility and fuel situation. Taiwan proposes large rise in defense spending amid escalating tensions with China. Former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan gets protective bail till 1st of September in terrorism case. And in badminton, Indian shuttler H.S. Pranoy defeats compatriot Lakshya Sen to enter quarterfinals of World Championships in Tokyo. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Malaysia. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.